Hey there, and welcome to the YouTube channel of Law and Lumber. So, as those of you who do follow the channel already, you guys know that I break down legal analysis, current topics, trending topics, etc. But there's a second half to this channel, and that's the creative side. So, I need something to get me through my day on a daily basis. As a practicing attorney, a lot of that mess really does take a lot out of me, so I end up in the shop more times than not. It's the place where the creative juices get flowing, and honestly it takes away a lot of the nasty stuff that I have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. So this is the other part of my life that I get to share with you guys. So some of you might know that Joe Neerman from the channel Good Logic on YouTube was visiting a week ago, and he was observing a trial downtown in DC. Well, while he was here, and yes, I did put him up in my house, while he was here, I convinced him to come down to the shop so that we could do a project, one that I convinced even Joe Neerman that he could do with my assistance. So we made a Lazy Susan. Now, some of you who follow the Instagram page, Morton Woodworks or Law and Lumber, might have seen some of my epoxy pours, and if you haven't, I'll put links in the description below. One of the epoxy techniques that I use is to create these Lazy Susans in a variety of patterns and colors, etc. And honestly, it's a very easy project. It's one of those projects that really isn't that complicated. It can be done by just about anybody. You just need the right materials and a little bit of time, and then most of all, just a bit of patience. But honestly, less patience than you might think. Heck, I got Joe to do it. Anyways, we were down in the shop, got him to make a Lazy Susan, and I thought it'd be great to make a little video for you guys so you can see the process going through it. And I tried to be as instructional as I could. If you guys like this type of content, if you want more instruction, let me know in the comments below. If you like the video, please hit like. If you want to keep seeing more of this stuff, then subscribe to the channel. Anyways, I really hope you guys enjoy this content, and yeah, let's get at it. Let's see Joe make a Lazy Susan. Okay, see you guys. Okay, so today we're going to teach Good Logic how to make a resin poured Lazy Susan. We're going to do what's called a dirty pour, which essentially is a pour that the resin disperses in various colors and leaves a bunch of patterns. I'll throw a couple examples up so you guys can see what it is we're talking about. I wanted to do real quick and walk through the materials you need for this. Latex gloves or a latex substitute, something that's going to keep that epoxy off of your hands. You need some crafting sticks, just things to stir the epoxy. For the lazy pour, or for the dirty pour, I like to use these strainers. Just a little strainer you get at Bed Bath & Beyond or whatever home goods store, etc., that is used for sinks. Then you use some pigments. There's a link in the description for those, just the ones I use. To color the epoxy, then you're going to need your epoxy. I'll put the link in the description for this stuff too. Art Resin, I've enjoyed it. It's a 1-to-1 mix. Mixing cup, these guys have graduated increments so that I can see what's being mixed. Then you need something to lift the base off of the surface you're using. You're going to need some plastic covering. I like to use a big trash bag. The reason why is I'll show you, I put the wood into the edges so it creates kind of a dam or a barrier from anything that wants to pour out. And then you need your actual substrate, your surface. So today I've prepped just a Lazy Susan. These guys are great because they sell these discs at Home Depot. Just a little disc. They're little tabletop discs. You should be able to find them. Really no problem. Just sand it, prep it, prime it, just to give yourself a nice little base to work off of and fill any holes that are back in there. So those are the materials you need, and then let's get to it. Let's go ahead and set this up. Now I'm going to stop here for a second just so I can show you guys what I mean by setting it up like a dam. So when you pour this stuff, it likes to move. It essentially is a rather fluid or viscous material that you're working with. So you actually want to make sure that there's not really the ability for this material to get off of the work surface and onto the floor. Once it's on the floor, any hope of cleaning it up when it's wet ain't gonna happen. You gotta wait till it cures, and then when it's cured, then you can chip it all up, but it really is chipping it up. It's not an easy process. So let me show you my trick for getting around that. So we use our little paint lifts just to elevate the surface that we're going to be pouring on top of. Don't worry about getting epoxy on these things. Once the epoxy dries, you can chip it off or break it off. Epoxy, generally speaking, cures. This stuff cures within about 24 hours, which is great for this application because within that period, about 18 hours, you can actually go back and remove any of the epoxy rather easy. It's pretty pliable about 18 hours or 12 hours after that. You can just peel it off kind of like a half-dried paint and just dispose of it that way. So we've got our surface. It's elevated off of the plastic. We've got the sheeting with the dam, and now we need to get to the actual epoxy itself. So the epoxy itself that I use is a 1-to-1 epoxy. Epoxy is a two-part adhesive. There's a resin and a hardener. And it's an adhesive that forms by chemical bond. It's stronger. So most glues that people think of, there's a base. There's something that carries the adhesive or the adhering particles in suspension. A lot of these are water-based or polyurethane-based. If you've ever dealt with wood glue is a polyurethane-based glue. That substance or the adhesive particles of that are suspended in a polyurethane base. So when you spread it out, the polyurethane slows the drying time of the water in there. So when the water dries over a period of 12, 24 hours, whatever glue you're using, it allows that water to dry out and then the adhesive is left behind. Epoxy is different. Epoxy is a two-part system. Those two elements, the resin and the hardener, combine, and when they combine, the molecules get in contact with one another. When they're in contact with one another, that's when they start to begin an exothermic reaction. That reaction itself cures the epoxy to a hardened subset. So that's what we're going to be using today. So while I'm sitting here getting everything ready for Joe to pick out frickin' colors, I forget one of the most important steps in the world, which is you have your base, right? This is what we're going to pour on top of. This is the surface we're going to use to pour on top of. Well, the pour goes over the sides. And if you don't want to spend 9 million hours sanding, highly recommend take some blue tape, lay it out, boom, 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 and then you come back with a razor blade and just cut around the circumference. So when the epoxy pours over the edge, all you end up having to peel up is you can peel up the tape and cut the epoxy so that you don't have to go back and do any sanding. So, almost forgot it. That would have been a freaking nightmare. So, glad I remembered. Now, we can have Joe pick his colors. I walked everyone on the video through the setup, and now we're at picking colors.
All right.
So, what I would suggest is that you want contrasting colors.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a base color that's going to be, now these are poured with resin only because the resin's the heavier stuff. The hardener is going to be thinner viscosity, so it'll thin it out a bit. But the resin stuff, because this stuff is time sensitive, you want to pour the heavier stuff first. So now we pick our colors. And so there's the base color, which is whatever you want the background color to be. There's going to be a bunch of stuff that pours off the sides, and that's the color that you need to think of. Let me actually grab an example so I can show you what I'm talking about. So this guy.
So that's the background. That's the base of black.
Yeah. So that is a white painted base, and you can see the clear epoxy flowed off, but the black was the base of the epoxy. So you need your base color, and then you see you want to pick a bunch of 4 different contrasting colors that are going to work well together.
Okay.
So your base color can be, I would recommend black or white.
All right. Let's go with white.
All right. So we've got white for the base color, and now you pick your basically your contrasting colors, all the colors that you want in this thing.
Mm-hmm.
Recommendations: if you want to stick with the channel, do you want to look like the channel or no? You
My
like
channel.
red? Yeah, you like red and blue.
That's what that is for my channel.
But what are your favorite colors?
I'm not a girl.
Not a girl.
No, I'm not a girl.
So yeah, so darker greens.
I don't
blues.
have a favorite color.
You don't have a favorite color.
No. I mean, when it comes to shirts, I actually like dark green because that brings my eyes.
Dark green brings out the eyes.
But not on a lazy Susan. Like, doesn't have anything to do with that. Like, I wouldn't do that.
Midnight blue is a good one.
Midnight blue.
And then I like to say this one because it's sauvage.
All right.
Savage.
Yeah.
Because you are a savage.
There you go.
We're going to mix the Savage with the Merlot because we'll just have some Savage Merlot.
Uh-huh.
And then we'll do a gold.
I like that.
Because gold will contrast
Between the two.
between those two. Or we could go crazy and do like a copper.
See, now you're just like getting way out there. But we
Now
can try
throwing
it.
your head. Let's try that. Let's try the copper.
Yeah, you're blowing my mind here with this.
Blow your mind with that.
Uh,
The copper. Then we're going to play with it. We're going to do Lux Emerald and we're going to mix some pearl in there and see if we can't get that. Those 4 colors will work well. We'll do white as a base. Yeah. All right.
So these all have the same viscosity?
At this point they do. And then so these have the resin. So epoxy is a 2-part substance. There's a resin part and a hardener. And they actually create a chemical reaction. I was trying to explain it on a video earlier, and sometimes people really confuse it. The epoxy itself is, like I said, it's 2 parts. Resin, hardener. When the 2 of those combine, the molecules start interacting with each other. They then start to form a chemical bond with each other. So they create heat in that. It's an exothermic reaction. So when you put the 2 together, they start creating heat internally. And the heat actually forms the fusion bond that exists between the epoxy. So you have to, when you stir it, you have to make sure that you're mixing it appropriately because you have to make sure the molecules are touching with as many of the 2 substances as possible. Now, every epoxy is a little bit different. Every one of these makers has a different proprietary blend. The goals of the blends are to get the smells down. So if you've ever had to fix anything that uses epoxy, you go to Home Depot, you buy one of like the JB Weld epoxies, the thing smells like complete ass. Like it smells terrible. And it actually is pretty toxic to you. Well, when you're doing stuff like this in the pores, that's important to you. You don't want something that's coming up in your face and just knocking you on your ass. So this stuff, art resin, is made for this particular purpose. So they have their proprietary blends that mix open time being the time that the epoxy is actually viscous and you can work with it, and then full cure time. There's benefits to using any one of those.
Should I be mixing all of these?
Not yet. Not yet. Because I just need to use big colors, and then what I'm going to do is fill in the rest, and then as I fill them, I'm going to fill one, and I'm going to show you how to actually mix it. And it sounds stupid, like you know how to mix something, but you can actually fuck it up if you don't do it right. Rather, for YouTube's, you can actually mess it up if you don't do it right.
Now, why did you blend 2 colors in there?
Because I want that to be like a light, like
Lighter
a
green?
brighter green, so it like jumps out at you a little bit. And you're not a sparkly guy, so I don't want sparkles. You just said like more than once you're not a girl, so I'm not gonna put sparkles.
No, when you asked me if I have a favorite color, I was like, I don't know guys that have favorite colors. That's something you guys have. I've never heard of. I say.
Pretty sure the comment section of this video is going to blow up with guys and favorite colors. Or the guys that are in the camp of, I don't have favorite colors. Or people are just going to be mean.
No, that's true. That's okay.
So just do that.
That's okay.
Yeah, people can be mean all they want. And then for the base, actually use a dye.
Why use a dye for the base?
I want it to be thinner, and I want it to be more consistent all the way throughout. These pigments, while the pigments themselves are almost like microscopic. Well, they're macroscopic, but they're super tiny. They're mica. So while they're really tiny and they get held up in suspension, they give color all throughout. When you get super thin on the edges, they can thin out, and you can get like patches of clear. And you don't really want that.
Right.
So
that's why if you have a dye, it'll.
Yep, it actually spreads a little bit easier. Now, the problem with this is it's a pain in the ass because it actually has to be pretty close to 1-to-1 ratio right on the money. If you're not, then it doesn't cure all the way, and then you get like a sticky, nasty mess.
I thought I was gonna come down here. We were gonna just be like, I don't know, building like a cabinet, building the Lazy Susan here, and then I was gonna be like carving it out, and there was gonna be all sorts of. And you basically said, "Hey, we're gonna go back to kindergarten. Pick what's your favorite color, Joe?"
It is, yeah, it's kindergarten again. Welcome back to kindergarten. Like, I mean, based on some of the things you say, you would ask if you ever graduated. Dun dun dun. All right. So when you're stirring it, it's just a gentle stir. You just want to make sure you wrap the edges.
Okay.
Don't incorporate too much air because that makes it a pain in the ass. But just keep doing that. We have to do that for about 5 minutes.
Okay.
Just to make sure it's all combined. Yeah. Like, you're not a kindergartner, but I don't know. Should we ask Sean if you're a kindergartner? No.
Should I? Do I? I don't know how I get air in here if I wanted to.
You're fine. So that's why the hand stir. Sometimes with the bigger stuff, I use like actual like drill stir.
I see what you're saying. More close. How do you know when the stirring is sufficient?
5 minutes. Like, I mean, the reason I say 5 minutes is I did a project once where I poured about 2 gallons of epoxy, and I had to go back because I didn't have enough. And because I had poured the first batch, this is one of my really early projects, I went back and tried to mix a second batch, but I was rushing because it was a supplemental batch. It wasn't like I was trying to make up time. I didn't want the stuff to cure, and I didn't mix it for the full 5. So I rushed, figured that speeding up the drill would allow it to mix faster. Poured it. The epoxy I was using at that time is a 3-day cure. It's a long cure epoxy. It's for pouring tables, like the stuff you see. Well, never really fully cured. It remained half cured, so it was like this nasty, sticky substance. And no matter how much time passes, it's not like
it's like eternally.
It's going to be eternally like sticky and gooey because this stuff needs the chemical reaction in order to cure. Otherwise, it'll just be goo.
How long does this normally take to dry? Like, when will this be done?
It'll be done tomorrow. Like, you would touch it tomorrow, but it'll be fully cured in 24 hours. And when we're done mixing these, we're going to put on gloves.
Oh my.
Yeah, because otherwise the YouTubes are going to yell at me that I didn't have you put on gloves because you don't want this stuff on your skin. It's not really harmful. I can get it off with acetone or some other harmful substance.
Do you want me to switch over to that one, or?
You're fine. I got these guys. Because I've done this enough, I kind of know what it's supposed to feel like. As you stir it, you actually probably will start feeling it get warm. You actually, if you put this cup, if you just hold the cup for a while, it'll actually start getting warm, and that's the exothermic reaction happening. I have had some of the harsher epoxies.
Okay.
I put it in a plastic cup and it's melted the cup.
Really? That's perfect.
Like the whole 5-minute cure epoxy stuff like that. If you pour it, one of the reasons they give you maximum depth pours because of that. Because if you put too much of it in one direct location, the heat generates from it way too hot, like a battery pack. and you can actually melt a cup, or I haven't ever heard fires, but the fumes also on some of this stuff can get bad. See, this stuff doesn't smell too bad, but some of this epoxy that you buy is just gonna melt your face.
I've had bad incidents with things you don't expect to catch fire, catching fire.
That's the other thing you don't want to play with. I hate. So there was a debate on YouTube, and on Twitter, someone raised the question to me. There's a process called fractal burning, and what it is you take a piece of live edge wood and you wet it. When you wet it, the water seeps down into the pores of the wood, and then you take an electricity source and you connect one end of the wood, one probe in one end, one probe in the other end. And the electricity, the current, finds the most natural path to the other side, and it starts fire.
Oh, that's what happened in my pants. I'm not making that up.
It happened in your pants. What happened?
Okay, so you know that jacket that I was wearing?
Yeah.
The suit jacket.
Yeah.
When I bought that suit, I love that suit. It was so good. I was wearing the suit for like the second time in my life. And back then I was using this vape which had like this battery sort of thing in the center. And batteries always die, so I keep like a fresh battery in my pocket. So I'm walking down the street and all of a sudden I just feel like this heat by my thigh. And I'm like, what the hell is that? I'm talking on the phone and all of a sudden I start screaming like, ah, 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 ah. And it's like there's a fire in my pocket because I had like 2 coins that ended up being on opposite sides of that battery that was rolling around my pocket and literally burnt the pants, burned through the pants onto my skin. Like I had like a fire in my pants. Yeah, I never was able to wear the suit again. I just wear that jacket as like sort of like a. I was very upset. I was like, I went to like a tailor. I was like, how much does this cost to fit? He's like,
You can't fix it.
$300.
Buy a new suit.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, that sucks. Yeah.
All right. So now we're gonna do. One of the cool parts of this is we create a layered look, right? So we'll pour some of our blue in. This is what I was trying to talk to you about last night a little bit. So you pour some of the blue.
Mm-hmm.
Set that off to the side, and then take a spoon. Like if you ever poured a, what's what I'm looking for? Use a little bit of white just to create a separation. Never pour a black and tan. You pour it so that the epoxy goes down the edge of the cup, so that it can layer on top rather than just break the surface.
Yeah, when you say black and tan, I think of cabs. I'm not sure what black and tan is.
Black and tan is England and Guinness.
Oh. Oh, oh really? Yes. So you do that to create the 2 streaks down the side.
Yeah. So now you see it kind of creates that little separation barrier. And then you start layering your colors.
You don't care about the white in the center?
We'll see. Because when it comes out, there's no controlling it. Like when you start pouring the stuff, there's really no controlling it. Well, there is a little bit, but not like you would expect.
So they go down the other side there.
Sorry. As long as the epoxy doesn't start mixing with itself, all right, so I want you to grab a pair of those latex gloves that are behind you. YouTube. I have never done this without latex gloves, ever in my life, never once. I've never been down here after a bottle of wine thinking I could do something really quick and then...
Never ever.
Never ever.
Feels so CSI-ish.
Always 100% safe at all times. As should you be.
With goggles.
With goggles, yes. You don't need goggles for this stuff.
Yeah.
But to anyone who's watching this one, look at the epoxy you're using. I'm using this stuff. This stuff is made to be used indoors. Some epoxies are not made for this. Be very careful of the epoxy you buy.
Well, otherwise, fumes pass out. Bad things.
Bad things. All right. So, you start with our base layer.
Mm-hmm.
There's still some in there we can use later. So then, if you just watch what we're doing here. Just rock it to get a nice little spread out towards the edges. And this becomes less important as we start going because when we keep pouring in the middle, and as we keep pouring in the middle, it pushes the rest of it out. It's not moving that fast is because I actually have my house air conditioned. If we were outside and it was 80 degrees.
It'll just roll on down.
Oh yeah.
Put it this way.
Control it.
No, man. I don't like it 80 degrees.
80 degrees. My friends come over and they're like, why is your house always an icebox? That's the way I like it. I don't do heat. Which, you were telling me about Jerusalem, like, that's hot. That's hot. Now comes the fun part. So, I'm going to hold this. You're going to take that, and you're going to pour it through the strainer, right through the middle of it. Slow down. Now we let that kind of disperse. And as we let it disperse, right?
Cool. The copper is a good call. So obviously, as you're tilting it around, you want to be careful and make sure that the whole strainer doesn't come forward.
There's some resistance there. It's not going to do it all the time. All right, so now we're going to start interchanging a couple of the colors.
Okay.
So kind of pick a spot, put some of the gold in, copper. Copper always goes a little green. Then we can take the green and go to red.
So obviously, whichever one you start with first, is further out on the outside.
And you see that we did that first like dirty pour to give like a good mix on the outside rim.
Well, the base for the outside.
I want that just to flow for a second.
So what's the difference between the two that you're squirting in there now?
So one is the resin, one is the hardener. So when I was saying there are two parts, you have to get them. It's one mix. That's why I get these cups like they're like, you know, they're like $10 for a pack of like 20 of them. Which at the end of the day, you're making these things. Use a few of them, you throw them away. They're disposable. But it's better to get the mix right than to not.
Right. So let's see, let's put little numbers on the side here. See, there you go.
Why don't you throw the rest of him in the strainer? I'll slide the strainer over like that. So when I slide the strainer over, now throw that guy in there. Dump it all. So you see now how the colors, when they come out of it, it's creating that like a candy ribbon.
Yeah. You worried about that bubbling there in the strainer?
No, we got it now. have someone who says, "Can you make me one exactly like the other, like this one?"
And the answer is no.
Yep.
No, I can never ever do that again.
Now that you're watching this, it's like, yeah, no, no, like. That's the reason I like this stuff. Is every single one of these that's ever made, it's a little bit different than the one next to it. So now, let that sit for a minute. Start moving it. And then I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay.
Now, what you get to do is you can see how it's flowing. Your goal is to get the epoxy running off the sides of every single part of it. That's your goal. But you'll be able to see as you're rotating it, moving it, that, just pick it up with two hands, rotate it and move it. You start to see as you start to move it around.
It starts to spread everything out.
And you can create, so start rolling it this way.
You don't want to just like take care of one side at a time. So
You kind of want it to all go over at the right time so you're not losing too much.
all right.
But it's this process here that starts to create the eventual look of what ends up happening. There you go. I rotate it back towards you. Fine. Go on, roll it. There you go. Now do this maneuver. So start to slightly turn it. There you go. Roll it this way. So take your right hand. Yep. Now roll it. You can start to just roll it back. There you go. Just like that. Yeah. Perfect.
It's so easy. It's so easy.
Told you. Make sure you get covers down there by your hand here. Let it come on the glove. It's fine. There you go. Now you can just set it back down. Right on the, yep, right there. And then I just make sure that I've got coverage on the wood. Once it starts to flow, it finds its way around the edges.
Yeah, I was thinking that. I was actually thinking today, I was watching a fountain right outside of, like, I don't know, one of the landmark buildings that they have every 30 feet here in Washington. And I was actually thinking as it was like flowing over, what makes it, like when it starts to flow over, what makes it flow in that spot versus like the other spot? I was actually trying to think through, like, there has to be something with the surface tension of the water.
What's the surface tension of the water? Water itself has adhesive properties.
Right.
It wants to adhere to itself. So the cool thing we can do is that. Little lightning bolts.
Right.
And then you'll see those kind of disperse. So this is whenever people have these old Formica countertops, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is one of the processes they'll use to actually create a granite look. Now, here comes another fun part. Joe, you get to use fire.
Sweet. Wow. That is so freaking wild.
Yeah, and with those little striation marks. You gotta give it a torch. Just push down the button. Just pull it off of the surface by a bit. There you go. Your goal isn't to heat the substance, so you're just trying to pop bubbles. Because what happens is you see, actually it creates a kind of cool effect. When you got the heat close to here, what it did was it thinned out the epoxy on the top and it made it flow faster, and the epoxy on the bottom stayed in place. So now you have more blue, so you can create or change the dynamic of it. So watch, if I do this, you see how it disperses it?
Yeah. You're saying because it's making it more
Viscous.
the lower end of viscosity.
Yep. And now when you start to see it, now
Or
you
raising
see
the
it,
viscosity.
but you
It's
see
more-
it
more liquid.
coagulate into these little bubbles or cells, pockets. So you're quite literally like watching chemistry happen.
Yeah, pretty wild.
So this is Lazy Susan a la Joe Neerman.
Nice. Nice.
Pretty freaking cool, right?
Yeah, it's pretty wild. That's it.
That's it.
Voila.
So I'll come back every now and then and I'll just knock the bubbles down because the air will start come up.
Right.
And I'll come back with the torch, just knock the bubbles down. Now what's crazy about it is, and I want the video to recognize this. What you guys are seeing right here, when I come back and knock those bubbles off, it's gonna look completely different. It's gonna change because the temperature of the epoxy is gonna help move these mica pigments and powders around. So when I come back down here, this is gonna look more just different. So we'll be able to see what it looks like as time progresses.
Okay, so we've let it set out for 24 hours and it actually turned out looking really nice. Look at the striation that we were able to get. Love the colors. So let's go ahead and take the epoxy off the back. So now you can see why we put the tape on the back of this thing. So the epoxy pours over the edge and we got to get the tape off somehow. Now, when I first started making these, I would use a X-Acto knife or a razor blade like this. And I would try to wedge the razor blade in between the tape, the epoxy, and the wood. First, let me show you how it looks like when you just try to tear the tape up. The epoxy is hardened enough that it tears the tape right away. So then when I try to put a knife in between, you can see the knife starts to kind of catch. And it can tear away at the wood. And you really don't want the tearing away at the wood. So, let me tell you a little bit of a trick so that you can avoid that little tear out right there. Heat gun. And if you don't have a heat gun, a blow dryer will do. But the epoxy itself is set to 24 hours. It isn't set and fully cured yet, so you can actually heat it up. Now point the heat gun directly at the epoxy, and while it's heating up, it's okay to keep your hands there, just don't let it get too hot. But you can see that you can start tearing away, and as you pull the tape up with the heat gun, it starts to pull up nice and easy. So let's go ahead and get the rest of this tape up. Now we have to install our hardware. So first you got to find the center. Now I use a cardboard, and the cardboard allows me to set two parallel lines, which lets me find the center if I do a cross section between the two. Now I have to find the radius of the actual mounting hardware that I'm using. So I use a specific type of mount. Oh, there it is. That basically allows for me to mount the hardware with various screws at 4 different locations. Now, the mounting hardware you use is going to vary in diameter, so go ahead and measure to make sure you have the right diameter. Divide by 2, that gives the radius. This particular stuff is 9.5 inches, so I've got to set the radius of my compass to 4.25. Just setting the radius. Make sure it gets to 4.25. You want to be accurate with this because these screw points, you actually want to be dead center with them. So take your time, get it nice and lined up. And then you can see that I've already pre-drawn it because I make a bunch of these, so I have a cardboard cutout for this, just to give a standard. So now you want to be able to set your points. So with this particular hardware, there's a larger hole that allows you to drill in to the points where you actually want to set. So you want to line that point up. So you find the hole that matches the screw size you're using, and you line it up with the rim that you just drew. Now the important part is you need to be able to tack down, and you have to pin a hole to know, as a guide, to know where you want to put the screw. So you move it around to make sure that the line hits the hole that you're drilling at multiple locations. That makes sure that your hardware is dead on center. Sometimes it's easier to set the first screw, so let's go ahead and show you how to do that. And that's me just diagramming that there's 4 separate locations. And sometimes the hardware itself is going to be a little bit rigid to move. So if it is, just pull out some WD-40. Go ahead and spray those ball bearings so that you actually loosen it up. Just like I'm doing right here. Because you want that thing free moving. This is a lazy Susan. You don't want it to be too lazy. Work the WD-40 into the bearings. Make sure that the hardware is moving nice and smoothly. So When you're setting the pinpoints, you can use either a nail or an awl. Awl is that little tool that's right there on the right-hand side. That's what I'm going to be using. But if you don't have one, you can use a nail just fine. It works. So you've set your points. Now you just need to anchor down and press into the wood. Get a nice indentation because you want something for the drill bit to find and catch when you're trying to pre-drill these holes. So 4 holes are pre-tapped with the awl. Boom, 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 and boom. So now let's go ahead and set our screws. Now because I've already tapped the holes, I can use a thinner screw without too much concern as to whether it's going to grab or not. So I line up the hardware back again on top of the Lazy Susan. And now these are pan head cabinet screws. You see the flat head at the top? That basically allows it to pull the hardware into the wood. You want to make sure to use a screw that's not going to protrude towards the other side, so be careful with your measurements here. Now find your first hole, and then you're going to want to anchor it down, but not all the way. You want to be able to move this thing at least for a little bit, because you need to make sure the rest of the holes line up with your circle that you drew on the mount, rather with the pilot holes that you already tapped. So then you got to wiggle. It's going to take a little while. It's kind of a pain in the butt, but you know what? Better to get it done right than to screw it up. Line it up and then drill it down, not all the way. Make sure that you leave a tiny bit of wiggle room. And you can see that because I already pre-tapped with the nail or with the awl, the screw's going in pretty easily. And then, voila, you've got yourself a Lazy Susan. Congrats, look what you just made.